What if I told you that Netflix, the CIA, and more than a third of the entire internet all run on infrastructure built by an online bookstore? And what if I told you that this infrastructure, a multi-billion-dollar empire, was never part of the original plan? It was created almost by accident. This isn't a hypothetical. This is the story of Amazon Web Services, or AWS. The most profitable, most important, and most misunderstood part of Amazon's entire business. It's the invisible engine that powers the modern world. And it was born from chaos. When you think of Amazon, you think of brown boxes on your doorstep. You think of an e-commerce giant that sells everything from books to blenders. For years, that's all it was. But today, Amazon's retail business is not its most profitable division. Not even close. In 2024, a division hidden from the public eye generated over $100 billion in revenue, with operating margins that dwarf the company's retail sales. That division is AWS. It provides the fundamental building blocks of the internet: computing power, storage, and databases, all on demand. So how did a side project, born from solving internal IT problems, become Amazon's profit engine and fundamentally rewire the global economy? How did it change the very nature of starting a business? That's the question we're answering today. To understand how AWS happened, we have to go back to the early 2000s. Amazon had survived the dot-com crash, but internally, it was a mess. By 2002, Amazon was a collection of small, independent teams. Each team was responsible for a piece of the website. There was a team for the shopping cart, a team for the payment system, a team for the search function. And every single team was building its own infrastructure from scratch. If a team needed a new database, they had to order the hardware, install it, configure it, and maintain it. If they needed more computing power, they repeated the process. It was slow, expensive, and incredibly inefficient. Different teams used different software, different databases, and different programming languages. Nothing was standardized. A project that should have taken weeks was taking months. The company's growth was being strangled by its own technical debt. Developers spent 70% of their time on what they called undifferentiated heavy lifting, plumbing, not product. They were building server racks instead of building new features for customers. Amazon's greatest strength, its army of decentralized teams, had become its greatest weakness. The company was grinding to a halt. Jeff Bezos knew something had to change, radically. In 2002, Bezos issued a now legendary internal directive. It was a company-wide memo that would go down in tech history. It became known as the Mandate. The rules were simple, but their implications were profound. First, all teams must expose their data and functionality through service interfaces. Essentially, APIs. Second, teams must communicate with each other only through these interfaces. No backdoor access, no direct linking, no reading another team's data store. Third, it doesn't matter what technology they use. And finally, the most important rule: all service interfaces, without exception, must be designed from the ground up to be externalizable. That is to say, the team must plan and design to be able to expose the interface to developers in the outside world. The final point was a threat: anyone who doesn't do this will be fired. This was a declaration of war on internal inefficiency. Bezos was forcing every single piece of Amazon's architecture to become a standardized, modular, independent service. Just like a Lego brick. Each brick could be used by any other team, without needing to know how the brick was made inside. This mandate was painful. It forced years of difficult and expensive restructuring. But in the process, Amazon's engineers became world-class experts at building and running scalable, reliable, and standardized services. They were building the internal tools to manage a global-scale internet company. And this led to a breakthrough realization. Around 2003, two Amazon engineers, Benjamin Black and Chris Pinkham, wrote a paper. They described a vision for a completely standardized, completely automated Amazon infrastructure. They argued that the company had become so good at running its internal services, like compute, storage, and databases, that it had developed a core competency. This is where the leap of logic happened. They realized that the very infrastructure they had built to solve their own chaotic problems could be offered as a product to the outside world. What if any developer, anywhere, could access the same reliable, scalable infrastructure that Amazon used to run its own massive e-commerce site? Instead of companies buying and managing their own expensive servers, they could simply rent capacity from Amazon, paying only for what they used. Just like a utility. You don't build your own power plant to turn on a light, you just plug into the grid. This was the birth of the idea for Amazon Web Services. In March 2006, Amazon launched the first major AWS service, S3, which stands for Simple Storage Service. It did one thing, and it did it perfectly. It provided cheap, reliable object storage over the internet. A few months later, in August, they launched EC2, the Elastic Compute Cloud. This allowed developers to rent virtual servers by the hour. This was revolutionary. Before AWS, starting a tech company meant spending hundreds of thousands, or even millions, of dollars on hardware. You had to buy servers, rent data center space, and hire a team of engineers just to keep the lights on. It was a massive, upfront capital expense. AWS erased all of that. Suddenly, a developer in their garage had access to the same computing power as a Fortune 500 company. The cost of failure dropped to near zero. You could launch a product, see if it worked, and if it didn't, you could just turn off the servers. You only paid for what you used. The launch of S3 and EC2 kicked off a classic Amazon flywheel. It started with customers. Startups like Airbnb, Dropbox, and Instagram, which likely could not have existed without AWS, flocked to the service. This influx of customers allowed Amazon to invest in more servers and build more data centers all over the world. This massive scale created incredible economies of scale. The cost for Amazon to provide each unit of computing or storage went down. True to its core philosophy, Amazon passed these savings on to the customer. Between 2006 and today, AWS has cut its prices over 130 times. Lower prices attracted even more customers, from small businesses to large enterprises like Netflix, Johnson & Johnson, and even the Central Intelligence Agency. More customers generated more revenue, which fueled more innovation. AWS began launching hundreds, then thousands of new services, from machine learning tools to satellite ground stations. This massive ecosystem of services created high switching costs. Once a company builds its entire infrastructure on AWS, moving to a competitor is incredibly difficult and expensive. More customers, lower costs, lower prices, more services. The flywheel began to spin faster and faster, creating an unstoppable competitive advantage. AWS wasn't just a service. It was becoming the default foundation for building anything on the internet. And that is the secret. Amazon Web Services did not succeed simply by renting out server space. That was just the product. The true strategy was far more profound. AWS fundamentally changed the economics of innovation. It turned the single biggest barrier to entry in the technology industry, the massive upfront cost of infrastructure, into a variable, pay-as-you-go operating expense. It democratized entrepreneurship on a global scale. The chaos inside Amazon in the early 2000s forced it to build a solution. The Bezos mandate forced that solution to be standardized and scalable. And the final leap of logic was realizing that the solution they built for themselves was infinitely more valuable as a product for everyone else. Amazon took its biggest internal problem, its undifferentiated heavy lifting, and turned it into the company's most profitable, high-margin, and strategically important business. They weren't selling servers. They were selling speed. They were selling scale. They were selling the freedom for developers to focus on building products, not plumbing. If you just had that aha moment, do us a favor and hit the like button, and subscribe for more breakdowns just like this one. It helps us unlock the strategies behind the world's most interesting companies. The brilliance of the AWS strategy is how it transformed a cost center into a profit center. Every other company in the world viewed IT infrastructure as a necessary expense, a burden. Amazon was the first to see it as a potential product. The broader business principle here is powerful. Your company's solution to its own biggest problem might just be your next great product. Often, the most valuable business opportunities are hidden in plain sight, disguised as operational headaches. By solving your own pain points with rigor and discipline, you can build a tool or a service that an entire industry is waiting for. AWS proves that the most successful strategies don't just create a new product, they create a new platform that enables thousands of other businesses to succeed. Amazon didn't just build a cloud, it built the foundation for the next generation of the internet itself. If you learned something new, hit the like button and subscribe for more strategy breakdowns. And let us know in the comments, what company's strategy should we unlock next?